Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news. Today is May 20th, 2026, Wednesday. And yeah, I'm still feeling pretty sick, so I'm just gonna try and rush. Also looks like my macros are decreasing in their stability once again. So we'll scroll down the 24-hour peak uh, concurrent player base charts, see if anything's really changed. Uh, for the most part, yeah, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of news. The biggest news, and I can only speculate on as to why, um, is that not safe for work tags and mature content tags are being removed from Steam, amongst many other tags being merged and replaced or removed. Some of the ones notably being removed are Lego, which, in fairness, I imagine there's more games that have the tag Lego that aren't official Lego games than there are games that are official Lego games that have the Lego tag. And then some of the changes are they're changing clicker to include incremental, and they're adding things like cozy. Now, why do I specifically zoom in on not safe for work and mature content? One, because I'm probably a perv. Two, because it, with all the debanking and deplatforming that's been going on for the recent history, the past few years even, it does feel like by Steam eliminating mature content and not safe for work, which is a nebulous term and always has been, and if it really is just for better labeling, and that's all they really mean to do, that's good. But I can't help but think that the better labeling is going to eventually lead to just sexual content tagged games getting removed completely from Steam, or it might actually fix a big problem where things are games that should be tagged sexual content and in the adult section have been skirting around that by putting not safe for work or mature content tags instead, which really that's a separate issue of just people not really tagging or labeling their games correctly or putting them in the right section. But yeah, Valve doesn't want to do anything manually. They want to have a procedural system. But yeah, I have a real concern that by getting rid of mature content and non-safe for work, you're going to see those tags be removed, and then you're going to see a schism between what has sexual content in it and what has just a lot of violence and gore or even horror. Sometimes those tags were used for that too. And the violence and gore and horror is going to be left alone more than likely, since the Americans, the United Statesians, and the banks in the United States don't really have a problem with that. And then the adult games are just going to be ghettoized, for lack of a better term, segregated into that one tag, vulnerable at any point in the future to just be removed or otherwise delisted. Yeah, that's my theory, at least. That's my fear, at least. But of course, this was in a bigger Steam update, and Steam hasn't changed their tags in quite a while. It may also certainly affect, like, auto libraries. If you have a lot of games and they're building themselves up based on the tags the games have, then some of your auto-generating dynamic libraries will stop working if they're based on those specific tags, and new games won't get those tags. Old games will keep those tags. So, yeah. this isn't a immediate sweeping move by any means. And I think some of the other tag changes probably are very logical and very possibly will help eliminate a small percentage, tiny percentage of garbage games that get released on Steam. But not that much, because they are adding a tag that's like desktop or desktop companion or desktop pet, and they're calling that a game when really I don't think the desktop companions really are games. I mean, they might be interactive, but when you're mostly designed to not interact with them, I don't know how much of a game aspect that is. I guess it depends on your general vibe of what you feel like a game is. I saw a meme on Reddit talking about how Lego Batman is still calling the bad guys in Batman goons. So the millennial gooner phrase is not completely overriding the old gangster goons. Although at a certain level, I think the insults probably are synergistic. Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise, I've just been very sick. And so I really don't have too much to catch up on. Made a couple episodes of the Talos Principle. But yeah, I don't know if I'm going to make it tomorrow to my gaming meetup, because I just am not feeling 100% healed up. And yeah, this is a problem with chronic fatigue, is that it's just degenerative. So literally moving one shelf one day can trigger you 12 to 48 hours, 12 to 24 hours later, and you may just be sick for a week with flu-like symptoms, lots of coughing, heart, low pressure, high pressure stuff. And you're just in bed and not getting really even restful sleep or anything. So yeah, did I say I was playing the Talos Principle? No, I've been playing Blueprints. Yeah, I haven't played the Talos Principle in a long time. But yeah, the Blueprints is still paused. I potentially have a couple more episodes that I could easily drag out. There's even things in Blueprints that I feel like I have found the beginnings of a hint there, and if I really cared, I would go further and investigate it further. But it feels like when I Google answers, most of the answers are from a year ago, and notably, one of the answers is just straight wrong because the game updates, and with updates they added new content. So yeah, I don't know how many people are still really playing the game, but I really am unhappy with the game in the long run. Familiarity breeds contempt, certainly, but it would have been a bad game if you'd just done the first chapter and raced to room 46. It would have been a bad game if you'd done the first and second chapter. It would have been a bad game if you'd done the first, second, and third chapter. The third chapter is perhaps the best of the chapters, and then the fourth chapter is just ridiculously hard, like the second chapter. So yeah, but yeah, as a puzzle game, it lies to you, which is unacceptable. It tells you the wrong information, and it adds in a random aspect because of the random draft of placing rooms that just wastes your time and disrespects the player's time. So I put 100 hours into a game that really should have been a tight I'm going to say 10 hours. And then that would have been fine. If that first chapter had been 10 hours, if it had been a $5 game, to account for that, and then a year later they added a sequel, it would have made a lot more sense. It's not even, I think, a good puzzle game in that I think most people who are interested in puzzles want to focus on the puzzles. So then getting the family history and the backstory, well, that usually is something you would want in games. In puzzle games, it's not really something you want. I'm perfectly happy with barely knowing anything about the history of the characters in Myst, the father and the two brothers and the wife. They barely say anything about each other that matters. And I'm perfectly happy with that, because your real experience in Myst is obviously solving the puzzles, not figuring out the backstory. Although there is a little bit of story, a decent amount of story in Myst that you do have to pay attention to. It's not a lot. And I think most puzzle games now just get to a really ridiculous level of reading. Lots of book stuff. Blueprints is also terrible just because of how terribly it is designed to be a video game. That you really have to have a pen and paper and a notebook and a camera all set up, or a special app even set up. When somebody makes an app to take notes around your game and it's not you, you know you've really screwed up as far as developing a puzzle game. So yeah, I am just ready to be done with it. Now weirdly, I don't know if I'm really going back to Resident Evil 2 Remake. I'm leaning more towards thinking that I will just see if I can air the episodes of the first run and then trash the episodes of the New Game Plus run, which would be 4 or 5 episodes. It would be the biggest number of episodes I've trashed that was my own decision by far. I maybe have trashed one episode with bad audio and tried to replace it with something better in other series, but yeah, I would be losing somewhere between 3 and 8 episodes. And then I don't know really what I want to do as far as the next game. If I really should even do a next game, or if I shouldn't just go back into more of a try and get more stuff done as I try and get cleaning and decluttering going again. I'm also having, even though it's right on the verge of summer, my house seems to love to let moisture in and not let it out. So I've had to replace my dehumidifier. I tried all kinds of settings, and I think I've gotten it as good as I can as far as my air conditioner, but it's still not getting the humidity anywhere close to where it should be. I'm at 60%, somewhere as close as 70-79%. Some of that is when it's kind of rainy outside, but some of it also is just, hey, it's pretty cool and normal outside. But yeah, it's very possible that all of my AC ducts are just full of dust, and so maybe they just absorb and release moisture like crazy. But yeah, I imagine my house is also just full of holes. It would be really nice if there was just some way you could, without ruining everything in your house, release something in the air that would seal up holes in the house. But yeah, nobody's invented anything like that. You probably have to put a tent around your house and then fill the outside with a chemical after pressure sealing the inside of your house. When you're building a house, they totally can do that if you're going for super energy efficiency. But even that may not really help with humidity. though. I had a slight fear that it's just seeping up from the foundation, which is a possibility too. If anything, that would kind of make the most sense, is that there's just some underwater aquifer really far below that is seeping moisture up from the ground. It really wouldn't even have to be an aquifer. It could just be general moisture in the soil. Yeah. And I've also realized that a decent amount of my bathroom exhaust pipes on my ceiling don't have caps on them, and that's something I would like to see fixed too. It's crazy, when it rains you hear water running into the microwave oven range exhaust. That's probably rusting out something, if I was to guess. But yeah. I've got more projects I'd like to get done. I gotta prioritize, certainly, and try and get things done that are most important as fast as possible. Is there anything else going on? I watched the final episode of The Boys, which literally ended with the cast and crew flipping the bird the middle finger to the camera while they show these pictures, which you should never do. There's just never a scenario where everybody who sees that picture is going to be in on the joke and think, oh, that's funny, and no, that's silly, if it is even supposed to be a joke. I'm not sure it is supposed to be a joke in this case. It may very well be that the creators, as in most of the cast and crew and production and all, really did just develop a hate for their audience, and thus they gave a really crappy final season and a really crappy final end. Yeah. And apparently there's a spin-off series called VOT Rising that I don't see a reason why you would want to watch that, and I honestly don't see a reason why you'd even want to watch Gen V if they came out with a new season of that. The concept could have gone a lot further than it did, but they really screwed it up. And this probably is very similar to like the comics, and it probably also kind of just highlights the flippantness and lack of care that comic creators have to have, because their comics get canceled, really not even because they're terrible, just because speculative collectors only want issue number ones of series. So you'll get 24 to 36 issues of a comic, which is 2 to 3 years at most, and then you'll get canceled for no reason, just so they can reboot it and make a new number one. And even if you're the same person still working on it, that new number one will have a different name, different label, and the story will have to start over. There is also a problem with comics in that, yes, pretty much nobody new is going to buy issue 36 of a series, because they're not going to be willing to spend the money on an unknown where they have to read 35 issues or spend the time reading 35 issues before then. Which for TV shows, that's kind of the same thing, is that I think we are probably at the point where every TV show either needs to be something really stupid or something really simple every season. Stupid meaning you get it because it's Survivor, or you get it because it's a very basic premise, Yeah, TV shows used to have a full like explanation at the beginning of their episodes, and we just don't have that anymore. So yeah, I don't see a way that you really would like the series finale of The Boys. In general, I've heard at least a couple of people say that they were really turned off from episode 1 of The Boys, which sort of gets a finality wrap up at the end of the series 5 seasons later. But yeah, the amount of violence, sexual violence, and just grossness in the series was very high, and that was the sales point. But perhaps it would have been better if it was just the 7 that were completely corrupt, and then 50% of the superheroes were actually good people, and 50% of the superheroes were actually bad people. It never really got anywhere close to that, and they very quickly started to even forget about other superheroes even existing. For the 5th season, yeah, you see like 4 or 5 super powered people, but none of them really are superheroes. Yeah. It just was a huge disappointment, really, and I will leave it at that because I think plenty of other people are going to say the same thing with even more spoilers. I did watch all of season 2, I believe, of Citadel. They took so incredibly long to release season 2 that I kind of have the feeling that season 2 is just like completely different from season 1. It definitely felt like it was completely different, and then season 2 kind of wraps things up, and yes, you could easily make more Citadel shows, but I don't really see a good reason for that. Spies who can erase their brain and take on a different personality is somewhat of an intriguing idea, but it only works if you actually use it, which they don't actually use in the 2nd season much at all. So yeah, I am now officially out of things to waste my time on watching TV wise, so I'll have to find something new. Still playing Pokemon TCG Pocket, nothing particularly surprising there. I saw an article about how Gods of Victory Nikkei made a lot of money, apparently. So, yeah. If you're a person who goes, oh, who cares if they get rid of the adult games, the sexual content games on Steam, well, just look at the mobile gacha charts and realize that the only money being made at all in mobile gaming is through gacha, which is a little bit of gambling, and the only money being made in gacha, for the most part, is adult content things or licensed tie-in things. Not barely enough money is being made to even grow or maintain the mobile gaming market. So yeah, if adult games left Steam wouldn't get shut down or anything. I'm not going to make a hyperbolic statement like that. But you might very well see that a significant number of people are just moving over to DL site or some other site to buy adult games, and that a lot of money all of a sudden is drying up. Which, yeah. Or you could look at it from the other realm of like YouTube, and how YouTube's demonetization and censorship, as random and crazy as it is, has also driven people away and created a less viable platform. Which, by the way, YouTube promised some new features and they haven't implemented them, which is very typical of YouTube, and they are now promising even more new features, where I believe advertisers can straight up target specific channels. So if they want to advertise only on PewDiePie's channel, for example, that seems like that is now doable, which means that you're going to just see small and medium content creators not get advertising even more. So yeah, once again, the new CEO of YouTube is not very different from the old CEO of YouTube in that they are trying to pander to a elite few, which is pretty much true in all businesses. But that really doesn't work for YouTube, I think, and it doesn't work for the viewers of YouTube. Still playing Memento Mori also. But yeah, even when you look at gacha games, though, you may very quickly realize that of about 200 listed here, only 100 of them are making even reasonable amounts of money. $40,000 a month would be fine if only one person was developing that game and they hadn't invested a lot of time developing the game, but that's highly unlikely to be the scenario. It's probably entire teams getting paid pennies or not getting any kind of residuals or anything like that. So yeah, Blueprints is paused right now. That's why it's not making any audio. There is something there. Let's see, we should look at Forza Horizon 6. I am interested to see what the reception is so far. We do see that the Steam controller is being advertised. Portable dehumidifiers are not cheap, and I'm fairly peeved that the one I had broke as quickly as it did. They are over $200 type devices, which it's not a fun $200 type device. It's a necessity. If humidity goes up, things will break. Discs will rot. Furniture will warp. You'll get mold. Things like that. I saw Game Grumps playing this game, so this is one of those weirdo streamer bait games, I imagine. But yeah. Yeah. It really sucks to have this whole this is another game with sexual content on it as far as the new and trending one games. So yeah. That's got to tell you something too, even if it's not your bag. The fact that a sexual content Metroidvania game is in the top 10 list. Is this 10 games? Yes. Shows that there's a lot of times not a lot of competition, and even if there is a decent amount of competition, the audience and the demand, people who are willing to put money behind games, are more interested in that. There's an interesting article on Reddit where somebody's talking about how they hate the term male gaze and how that is in particular become useless as a term, as a theory, which a certain level, I feel like it always was a mostly useless term in theory, uh, because when you're talking about TV, movies, animation, anything where you have someone not just randomly capturing footage, there is going to be a vision and a desire and a choice made all the time as far as what the camera is looking at. And yeah, I think it would be much more accurate to describe male gaze, if you're going to describe it as anything, as the female attracted gaze, which even 95-98% straight women would prefer to have look at attractive women, and they steal glances too. It is a weird thing in human society that everybody really is stealing glances of everybody else's body and then just trying not to get caught at it and trying not to stare. But yeah, the whole point is, the whole argument I think is pretty stupid though. Yeah. I think it would be much more valuable to talk about it would almost certainly be described as a homosexual gaze or gay gaze, a male homosexual gaze, the beefcakes, the man hunks, things like that being shown. Like, that happens far fewer times, and in that case, I guess we're still reserving the controller. I think it probably should be pushed to happen more often. Sam and Dean in Supernatural, if I can go back to Supernatural in particular, yeah, definitely hired to be attractive male characters, and definitely shown to be very, very well received amongst anyone who is interested in looking at an attractive male body form. Yeah, Forza Horizon 6 is rated very positively. Okay, I guess I'll just go ahead and put that on the wish list. Still don't have any Steam Decks. Did a little bit of work on my Steam Deck trying to see if I could play Legend of Zelda 4 Swords. That would have been one I hadn't ever played. And yeah, it doesn't seem like there's a way to play 4 Swords with only one player. You can play the GameCube 4 Swords Adventure, which is, I'm pretty sure, a sequel to 4 Swords, but 4 Swords itself is like a Game Boy, a Nintendo 64 addition to another Zelda game that was designed to have you connect up to 3, maybe even 4 Game Boy Advances to the Nintendo 64, I think, where each person would use their own screen to control a character, which, retrospective wise, it's going to be really hard to convince 4 people to play 4 Swords with you. And I don't know if it was, I think it was very hard even when it first came out to convince people to play 4 Swords with you. And it's not like the Game Boys could play the game by themselves, so it's not like 4 kids bring their Game Boys to school, which kids used to do that, but then they very quickly got confiscated, stolen, or smashed, so that stopped happening pretty quickly in the era of the first black and white Game Boy, for the most part. But yeah, the idea of 4 kids getting together and playing 4 swords, wireless or even wired around each other, wasn't even viable. You had to plug it into a Nintendo 64. There was a surprising amount of yeah, there's a surprising amount of like other extra Zelda things that were released around Wind Waker. They clearly were very concerned that people were going to reject the new art style of Wind Waker or just dislike the game. And I think there was definitely some pushback when it was first announced, and there was probably a little bit of pushback when it first came out. But honestly, I don't think the pushback was anywhere as bad as Nintendo thought it might be. And I would say, like, Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess were worse received Zelda games. And at a certain level, they started to get into this good cycle, bad cycle, which maybe Zelda always had a good cycle, bad cycle, that just got confused that some of the Zelda games were being put on the Game Boys and some were being put on the main consoles. But even The Adventures of Link, the second game in the Zelda series for the NES, was very poorly received. And yeah, I would like to snidely say Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are probably the worst Zelda games ever, but I'm only jokingly saying that because what Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom does is just completely redefine what kind of gameplay you're playing. And so it's just a completely different type of game. It's just not a Zelda adventure game at that point. It's some kind of Zelda open world survival game. Alright, let's go through the Video Games Chronicles. We, again, just want to burn through all of this very quickly. I really am just doing this out of a stupid sense of loyalty, for consistency's sake, really. Otherwise, I would have just skipped today anyways. Major Xbox hires expand the leadership team to strengthen console brand. 2 new hires and 1 promotion have given the Xbox brand a major shakeup. This seems like this is just a continued changing of the guard, and sometimes it feels like it's just making changes for change's sake. A Matthew Ball and Scott Van Vliet, which I suppose you announce when people have been hired, but also that does weaken the leadership and the focus on the singular leader, which you might want. I guess it really comes down to, do you want a good team, and do you want to promote your good leadership skills by hiring a good team and letting people know of it, or do you want to promote yourself and just be the singular genius, or promote yourself as the singular genius? Ball wrote the 2022 bestseller The Metaverse, great, and worked previously at Amazon Studios, which great. Sarcastically, I'm saying great. That sounds like he's pretty much a dud. And he is the Chief Strategy Officer. Van Vliet previously led the engineering team during COVID-19 pandemic, which kind of means nothing, and worked on Azure OpenAI, and was VP of Digital Play at Mattel. Then Chris Snackenberg has been promoted to Corporate Vice President of Partnerships and Business Development. And see, that in particular is probably a very important position. He joined from Activision Blizzard. His focus is on third-party games and publishers working alongside Xbox. Which I don't know how you get great partnership deals with other companies when there's so much confusion about your console and your brand is certainly 3 of 3 in the list of popularity. Hasbro has spent $1 billion on video games, and none of them are live services. Well, good for that. That being said, what are these games? Are they all in development, or are they just a list of terrible Monopoly games? Apparently not. We have this Exodus, which is going to be released in 2027. It does make a lot of sense that Hasbro would want to evolve its... Hasbro owns Wizards of the Coast, by the way. At least they do now. I don't think they always did. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense that a toy company needs to evolve and to go into the video game form, and at some point in the future there will just be this small division at Hasbro that still makes board games and sells those, probably still at ridiculously marked up prices. But then the vast majority of Hasbro's budget is probably going to be video game first stuff. Obviously, Wizards of the Coast also owns Magic the Gathering, so it makes a decent amount of sense that they should be working on a update at the very least to Magic the Gathering Arena and combining a digital experience with a real world experience of selling the Magic cards. Of course, they've also really pissed off an already usually pissed off audience, and I don't know how many people actually still play Magic or play Magic based on any of the rules that are established. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of people who are playing Magic with decks that they built years ago, and they just aren't buying new packs, and they aren't looking for new cards, and they're playing Commander, I imagine, more than just a rotating rule set of how you usually play Magic or how Hasbro wants you to play Magic. But yeah, when there's no new lifeblood to Magic, it will just eventually die out. Yeah, they haven't done anything with like Monopoly or Clue or anything that's been great. I do want to... Yeah, we saw this Warlock trailer a long time ago, Dungeons and Dragons game. Yeah, I don't think they've done anything with Dungeons and Dragons that have made people happy either, or Transformers fans. It's like everything that they have bought, they have really screwed up. Let's see if I can find this. Let's see. I thought it was called WS Store, which is a generic name. WS Game Company, I believe, is okay. So there's a really, really expensive store in New York and a couple other places called FAO Schwartz, and in that they have these like luxury licensed versions of Hasbro games that like have real gold or something along that line. Just potentially selling them for like $10,000. Just encrusted with real diamonds. Just ridiculous things that they'll have some of that for sale. And those usually are the bait items that then will get you down to thinking that paying $370 for a Clue Luxury Edition is somehow logical, when obviously it is pretty insane. And certainly that makes it, I wish we could make these pictures bigger. Okay, we can, good. That makes, I don't know if any of this is really gold. I imagine it isn't. At $370, it is just a rip-off price, I would bet. But yeah, these are the kind of things that rich people would put in their game room without really ever planning on ever using them. Yeah. But yeah, even $370 though is also a tastemaker that makes you kind of forget that the cardboard, paper, plastic version of Clue should be about $10, maybe even closer to $5. And yet you are going to pay a lot more. You're going to pay $20 for Clue, maybe even $25. I really shouldn't be going on side tangents today with all this cough. I apologize for coughing so much, but I mean, I can't really help it. So yeah, regardless, well, this is ridiculously overpriced. I really would love to get this set where they've taken and officially licensed it, which makes the price roughly about $44 for each board game, because they're basically paying the $20 to buy the board game and then spending another $20 to make profit and to put it in these new containers. And I imagine they're not even really doing too much more than that. They are nicely, I would hope, folding the boards into smaller sections so they fit in the books. It does create a weirdness in that you have very uniform books, all the same height, which would look really nice on the bookcase, but it's only board games from Hasbro, whereas the 3D printed one had like Hangman. I don't think they have made a Hangman one. And had chess. I don't think there's a chess one. So you would still have some. There's checkers and backgammon. There's chess. Okay, so I'm wrong about that. Yeah, we should probably just go through the whole list. So it's really nice, but it's weird that the colors are different. Certainly. It's nice that it's the same style. It's nice that it's not 3D printed, although I can't really speak to the quality until I got one in my hands. And that's the problem, is that one of these would be $44. To get the full set, you are talking a massive $650. Just more than a console. Again, something that rich people would throw money at, but nobody realistically would do it. I think the different colors really are dumb. We'll make a fairly nice and tidy single shelf of board games, but then your next shelf of the more German, the non-Hasbro board games are still going to be a random collection of different sizes and shapes. Nobody really has a... Oh, this 25 pack here is $1,000, not $650. There's a 15 pack on Amazon that's $650. And they're doing like 4 games every year until they run out of games, I imagine. But yeah, the 3D printed one I got was very poor quality. And maybe with acetone polishing I can polish it up a little bit, but it's still pretty poor quality. I wish there was just an easy way to get books like this and convert it yourself, because frankly, if it costs you $5 to just get a shell book, and then maybe you would have to figure out some way to kind of laser engrave / laser print on the sides and fronts, which would probably be pretty hard to do. And then you could buy the game itself for $20 and squish it in there yourself. Yeah, that would be $25 versus $44. Honestly, for the effort though, $44 doesn't seem that off. It just seems really off when you start talking about the total cost of it. And so you can see in Battleship, it's basically a plastic version of Battleships, maybe a smaller version than normal. It is interesting. It seems like all the books are the same height from year to year. But yeah, you can see that the inside of the book here is just a fake book. Unlike the 3D printed one where the book unfolds and becomes part of the board. In this case, you have a triple folded board, which probably means that as an official licenser, they're getting these folded with a folding machine at the factory at a different size, where normally the fold would be like down the center, and then you would have a 4-quadrant fold instead of what seems like is the case here, which is a 6-fold, which might put some seams in some weird places too. And yeah, I imagine a lot of what they're doing here is just sourcing and packaging holders. It looks like you get the instructions on the inside of the book. These are all fairly basic games. They are also potentially games you never really would play, though, too. So this is the kind of thing you might buy for an Airbnb if you're just trying to waste money. The Jenga pieces here, I suspect, are custom made to be smaller than they normally are. Yeah, that definitely seems like much smaller Jenga pieces. And then they're in book sleeves, which probably is great for shipping, just to protect the books a little bit more. But yeah, the price is massive. Yeah, and maybe if the 25 pack was on sale for $500, I might consider it if I had nothing else to spend money on. But yeah, I suppose if you had like a video game or a board game shop, you might have a collection of these that people could pull out. But then they also get to a point where they're dangerously too nice. I'm not 100% sure these would be the actual scale. Yeah, you can even see in the folds here that it doesn't feel like they really have a great folding machine putting in these extra folds. Yeah. I guess if I won the lottery, I would get something like this. It's a shame that there isn't a cheaper option. It's a shame that these games aren't public domain. too. Like, they really should be public domain. And that's pretty much all this company does, is that they're a official licensor of Hasbro games. And the Hasbro license their games to a lot of people. That's why you get the things like sports versions of Monopoly or city versions of Monopoly. Yeah. Free shipping over $75. Almost certainly going to get that. There's probably not a single thing you could get. Well, maybe one book would be below. Below $75. And you can see in 2026 they also have like Clue Junior and Scrabble Junior and I think it's Monopoly Junior, which that creates a different setup, certainly, where you're just getting the same games but in junior versions. Although Monopoly Junior looks like it might be a little bit smaller of a board, only 2 things instead of 3. Scrabble Junior doesn't have any bonus tiles on it, so less complexity that way. And Clue Junior is a completely different game. So yeah, I would assume these are the same height still of the others. But yeah, you definitely could have a possibility where one of these is different. Also a possibility that one of these games is not included, such as the Spanish Scrabble version. And yeah, Game of Life is like $50 and Risk is $50. So it's very possible that some of these are out of print. But yeah, I wish there was a cheaper version of this concept, and maybe there is, where it would make more sense. With the world of epoxy printing and laser printing, if you could get an empty box and just do a decent print, even if it was just like a sticker that you put all around it, like a vinyl wrap or something, more than a sticker, that might get you there. But yeah, you certainly are getting charged a lot for that, something like that. Maybe you could order wholesale and try and sell a bunch yourself, but I imagine that you would have to put thousands, if not millions of dollars into it. Not worth it for trying to get a single discount. And yeah, times are tough, yo, so it is pretty ridiculous for me to be showing off board games in vintage book forms. Which, yeah, well, I do think that's a cool idea. There is also very possibly just a better way to do it, and if anything, it probably highlights where a lot of board games box art is just not designed particularly well, because it would have been easy enough to take one side of a box art and make it look like a book, or 2 sides, a long ways and a tall ways, and make that look like a book. And then if you put the box on its side, it looks like a book. Although it might very well be the case that you shouldn't put them on their side, because the box will just fall open and all the pieces will fall out. But even then, the box art never really looks great on board games when they're stacked on a shelf next to each other. I've never seen it look good, at least. Of course, I'm also talking about board games, and I basically have nobody to play with and have no reason why I'd want to own them, other than just out of sheer stupidity. Moving on, we need to really hurry up today. I'm just going to cough and eventually I'm going to run out of energy. The Neo director Yoko Taro says new game projects start with the money. Neo director Yoko Taro explains new game projects and cancellations, canceled ones alongside Clover's Hideki Kamiya. I'd assume there's more of an interview here than what is a fairly obvious statement, that new projects start with money. I could certainly try and argue a little bit, but yeah, he's not wrong, but there is a possibility that if you're like an indie developer, or if you're in like super pre-production, you can have an idea and do maybe a couple hours at most worth of like pre-production work to make a pitch for money. If you have ideas, you can sketch them down in a notebook if that game ever gets made, certainly. But yeah, the project doesn't really start until it doesn't really start until you have funding that you can actually pay yourself or others. I wouldn't be surprised that even someone at Yoko Taro's level in Japan, there's just a lot of people who aren't suggesting he work for free, and it seems like his move very much is to say, I need to get paid, yo, which is not unfair to say. Yeah, it would be nice if everybody was on a universal basic income and then art could just be created for artistic sake. But as long as you've got bills to pay, as long as you're struggling at some level, everything gets corrupted by capitalism. So, yeah, it is very, very much fair to say you need to get paid before doing anything. A PlayStation State of Play showcase includes Marvel's Wolverine has been announced. It's interesting they made the announcement of no more single-player games on PC, and then June 2nd they're going to show off what I imagine is mostly a single-player PlayStation game. I guess this is their new tentpole system seller game. It seems like it also is from the developer of Spider-Man games, so that might explain why we haven't seen a Spider-Man 3 announcement, come to think of it. Although there is kind of a lot of people who have made Spider-Man games. It certainly is confusing me as far as going back and looking at like GameCube Spider-Man games to see if those are really relevant. There was all kinds of like terrible Batman and Spider-Man Game Boy games and Sega Genesis games that were not all absolutely awful, but they aren't really relevant. Not things you really would want to go back and play. I definitely saw people on Reddit just basically dismiss PlayStation and said, fine, we won't give them our money. There's no way I'm buying a PlayStation 5 or a PlayStation 6 just because they are refusing to sell it on the platform of Steam and PC. That they need to accommodate the consumer, not the consumer accommodate the seller, which is felt like a very mature for Reddit and the internet response to just say, you know what, there's plenty of other games to play and it's not that big of a loss. And the fact that what seemed to be the overall agreed upon thought, I think really speaks how PlayStation has really failed to make that even a tough decision. Like, they just don't have any tentpole games right now that would push people to buy a PlayStation. And Marvel's Wolverine might be a tentpole game, but they need 2 or 3 of them, and they won't have 2 or 3 of them by the time it comes out. A family-friendly Steam game is replaced by a crypto malware before being delisted. A family-friendly puzzler, Rodent Race, was transformed into a crypto-stealing malware disguised as an indie game, Beyond the Dark. Interesting. We haven't really had a ton of stories like this. We've had a couple of stories of things being allowed to be downloaded via Steam, which is a real problem. Steam should be scanning every single update, every single push, and nobody should really be good enough that that people could push corrupted versions of their games and get past scans by Steam. And clearly they're just not scanning the software, or they're not scanning the software fast enough, or they're only scanning the software after it gets flagged. It would make a lot of sense to have straight up VM machines, virtual machines, with cryptocurrency, with access tokens, fake access tokens set up, just to see if the game, once installed, tries to steal that stuff and do something. At a certain level, it's very, I think, reasonable for Steam to force all games to communicate only through their servers, through their protocols, and be more of a walled garden than I imagine it really is. This may also, though, be a case where a YouTuber was sent a link to maybe an early access or beta version that maybe those aren't being scanned. And this may very well be a case where this is just a YouTuber making complete nonsense up. Hidden in the Unity DLL is a dropper which downloads more malware from a C2 based on what programs and Chrome extensions you have targeting crypto and /defi wallets. Now, what is Steam supposed to do when these kinds of accusations happen? Obviously, they need to pull the thing from being downloaded. But yeah. But yeah, this is another example of Valve just needing to really scan every update and everything, because their brand and their confidence in their storefront centers around this kind of stuff never happening. Not happening every once in a while, but never happening. I do wonder about crypto at some point here. If I was just rolling in cash, maybe I should jump into the realm of just maybe getting Bitcoin, something fairly stable, something that isn't just going to be a meme coin. But I don't know why I'd really do that. Yeah, it would make more sense to buy silver or gold in my mind than it would to be buying crypto, unless we got to a point where you could actually buy things from stores using Bitcoin, which, generally speaking, I don't think you can go to Amazon.com and buy something with crypto. But who knows, maybe at some point it will be that way. I'm sorry about this. This is awful. This is really where I need to have somebody else just take over. UK-centric gaming showcase for one night only announced for IO Interactive and Criterion. We'll move forward from that. Dungeons & Dragons game from Star Wars Jedi Director has been cancelled by Hasbro. Giant Skull's previously announced Dungeons & Dragons game has been cancelled. This, I assume, is different from the other one, but who knows? Yeah. If I was Hasbro, I would be shoveling out every single Dungeons & Dragons things you could, because they need to figure out what a new generation's relationship to Dungeons and Dragons is going to be, and try their very best to get a new generation to figure out some way that they could actually enjoy Dungeons and Dragons, which is almost certainly not going to be playing the tabletop Dungeons and Dragons game. I just don't think new generations really have that kind of attention span. Do you really need it? Because you could probably play Dungeons and Dragons on your phone via just non-linear non-timed actions. Just everybody gets a notification when it's their turn. They take their turn. When the next person checks their notification and takes their turn, then it moves on to the next person. It's probably it wouldn't be as fun, certainly, but it would be much more manageable to do things like that. Although that still would probably require a dungeon master to be on their phone quite a bit. But that's only one person's time instead of 4 or 5 people's time. Kingdom Come Deliverance Studio has confirmed development of a Lord of the Rings RPG. It's an open world Middle-earth RPG is what they're describing it as, which may very well mean it is taking place after the defeat of Sauron or before Sauron being really a thing, which I could see it being before in particular, and that Sauron doesn't even show up until hundreds of years later. In a weird way, this feels like this could be Skyrim beating the new Skyrim, the next Skyrim beating the next Elder Scrolls game, if it actually comes out and if it's actually good. I don't know what a Kingdom Come Deliverance game would feel like. I didn't play that game, so I don't know how that implies this game might play or feel. But it almost certainly is guaranteed to be less janky and less generic and bland than the next Elder Scrolls game is probably going to be. It's going to be less like Starfield, I imagine, than the next Elder Scrolls game will be. The Returnal director founds a new game studio to develop new single-player IP. Okay. Lots of people talked about Returnal. I'm not sure how many people actually stuck with it and played it, or how many actual gamers played it versus just video game journalists talking about it. Embracer says it will more actively explore Deus Ex, Time Splitters, and Saints Row partnerships. A new company, Fellowship Entertainment, will run a licensing business for big and small IPs. Well, that's good, because, yeah, there's still some name recognition around the Deus Ex and Time Splitters and Saints Row games, even if all of these games are kind of dated. Like Time Splitters is just running around shooting people and kind of lacks a personality. It's almost like GoldenEye without the James Bond recognizable characters, is my general feeling of what it is. Deus Ex, it's always been a weird series as far as how it plays, but I like the story on it, so a full-on reboot of Deus Ex being licensed out to a different company I think could potentially work very well. And then Saints Row, they should just hand to anybody that has any kind of ideas as far as what to do with Saints Row. They should hand it to somebody and give them some kind of chance to make a pitch and develop things. Just don't make the Saints Row that was most recently made, where it was buggy and had ridiculously liberal characters for kind of no reason. Yeah, it was one of those games that went woke and went broke, or as they say. I don't know if that's really true, but the bugginess certainly failed the game. Embracer's announced its plan to split into 2 companies as Tomb Raider and Lord of the Rings spun off. Fellowship Entertainment will now run Dead Island, Kingdom Come, Metro, and more. This feels a lot like just shuffling the chairs on the Titanic as it sinks. One of the GameCube games I played, I don't know, was it called 13? That might have been the name of it. Basically was a Tomb Raider game, but it definitely wasn't popular, and it wasn't actually a Tomb Raider character. You're playing as this female spy character. So yeah, if you have a massive amount of, I'd imagine 5 to 10 terabytes of space, and you were just looking at every single game ever made, you would find that there are a decent number of like Tomb Raider clones and even Lord of the Rings clones that got made and might have interesting twists and might even have played better. They just didn't have the advertising and didn't have the name recognition. Remember, even in GameCube era, even in Nintendo Wii and Wii U era, it was very much a case where you had to go into a store and either find something randomly on the shelf or know by name and heart what you're looking for on the shelf. Most people would know what they're looking for. They would have been reading something like Nintendo Power or something like that, and had a name. Plus, the Toys R Us purchaser, the people who are deciding what goes on the shelf, are going to pick things based on name recognition. So very often a lot less shelf space or no shelf space will be given to a new IP compared to something that has Tomb Raider in it. Here we have another shot of the new Tomb Raider, which, man, that hairstyle just does not scream Tomb Raider, and that face really doesn't scream Tomb Raider to me either. Maybe the pose hurts a bit too. The way they have her neck twisted makes her neck seem like too thin. Like really, her neck should probably be going to about that point, and also it makes her neck look too long. But yeah, there's definitely some kind of facial capture, hair capture thing going on here that doesn't feel like a Lara Croft that I would have expected to see. And I don't think Lara Croft really is just like a code name like James Bond, where you can just say, well, anybody can play Lara Croft. I don't think that really works in video games, and it barely worked in the James Bond movies. But yeah, there is just a consistent expectation on what the face should look like, and even the previous reboot of Tomb Raider really didn't make her look quite the way I expected. Maybe that is just me being a gamer who's being too picky, but yeah. There may very well come to a point where all games are going to have to make super high-res 24K 3D models of characters' faces, and that character's face is going to have to be rendered down and used in all games for a decade or longer just so that the character seems consistent. Which even in live action movies and TV, maybe that's going to be the future, is that you're going to have actors and actresses come into a 3D scan room, scan their face at high res, at the peak of their beauty, at the peak of their youth, and then every single movie is going to have digital de-aging where they just apply that young version of their face onto the head of the older actor. So they'll do a whole career, a whole lifetime of acting. They'll be like 65 or something, and they'll instead have their 18-year-old, 20-year-old face applied on it. Which that would have helped in a couple of movies, certainly. Xbox Game Pass titles for the rest of May have been revealed. I follow Game Maker's Toolkit as a YouTube channel, and they made a game called Mind Over Magnet, and their game is in one of the Humble Bundles. I'll probably talk about that, but yeah, it is interesting to see somebody be able to actually make a game and promote it and hopefully have a decent amount of success. I kind of think that is probably the future for indie developers, is that you are going to just have a YouTube channel that is going to be 50% about the game you're developing and then 50% about something else that brings people in and captures their interest. And then you're going to make a game and you're going to hope that your followers on YouTube lead to more wish lists of your game and sales, so that you can sell a decent amount. What is a decent amount? Let's say you spend 4 years developing a game. You probably want at least $50,000 a year for worth of work there. So yeah, $200,000 of take-home profit, not gross, but like actual adjusted income, or actual take-home profit. Which, yeah, that probably it would be really hard, particularly if you're selling a $5 game. If you want like $50,000 for 4 years, that would be $200,000. So you would need to sell $400,000 roughly in gross at $5. You would need to sell 20,000 copies. Does that seem right? 20,000 times $5 would be 100. And you want 400,000 now. It would be closer to like 80,000 copies. Roughly 100,000 copies if we just estimate. Yeah. And the real goal for success is usually about 300,000 copies. So, yeah, even for a small indie game developer, you really are shooting for 100,000 to 300,000, probably 300,000 sales. And you have to realize that a lot of people are not going to make 300,000 sales, and a lot of people aren't even realizing the reality of the situation as far as the need to make 300,000 sales, unit sales, and how hard that really is. I imagine there's a lot of people who are developing games while being house husbands or housewives. There's actually very few game developers that are indie that are female that I can think of off the top of my head. I know of one that I follow on YouTube. A lot of them are like young and in college, and so they're not paying bills and things like that, or they have side gigs, so they're paying their bills by doing a side gig instead of hoping to actually recoup that expense. And even if you did get like $200,000 in profit, do you put that as a nice payment towards paying off a house, or do you then immediately turn around and double down and gamble with all of that and develop your next game? Most programmers develop their next game. Again, today's a terrible day for me to ramble. I don't even think I'm going to go through all the games on Steam today. I think I'll just do it off screen because this is really bad. Fortnite is back on the Apple App Store in most regions as the protracted legal battle goes on. Epic's and Apple's legal troubles have raged on since 2020. I thought this had been settled. But apparently not. Yeah. It definitely feels like Fortnite is going to be considerably less relevant now than the longer Apple drags its feet or fights this in court. That Fortnite is suffering where Apple really isn't going to suffer much from that. The next Pixel Junk game is Yeti Golf, an open world cozy golf adventure game. Yeah, that's in particular a reason why I'm not particularly happy with them adding cozy as a tag and letting that be a tag, because increasingly we're just going to have half of the games tag themselves as cozy, and it's not going to mean much. There is, I suppose, a small danger that cozy is just going to mean not violent, and then all of a sudden there might even be a case where violent games start to get censored and removed. I doubt we'd get that far, but it's possible. I certainly could see some parents going, you can only play cozy games, you can't play violent games. Or some emotionally sensitive people, or kids who think they're emotionally sensitive, only playing cozy games and not really exposing themselves to fictional violence, which there is, in my personal opinion, a real mental detriment to staying in the kiddie pool for your entire life and just not being willing to engage or at least try other forms of fiction and entertainment that are more extreme. Let's see. Nintendo announces Pictonico, a new mobile game that turns your photos into mini games. Well, they had one of that with the Game Boy camera many, many years ago. The interesting part here is that it is for your cell phone, which has a camera, not for a Switch 2, which could have a camera, but doesn't have a camera by default. Yep. So I wouldn't be surprised if this does get on the eShop of the Switch 2 for people that own that camera accessory for the Switch 2. But also, these mini games are gonna pretty well suck. It's just gonna throw people's faces in it. This is probably an example, you should actually watch it, of where like Nintendo Labs or a second party developer is doing experiments with video manipulation to see just where we are as far as integrating photos. And yeah, you can kind of see there that it's nowhere close to probably what you could do with a really powerful computer and just AI modification and generation. But it is almost certainly more than what the Game Boy camera version could do. Now, weirdly, the Game Boy camera also came with the accessory of the Game Boy printer. I doubt we'll get a Nintendo branded printer that would print out these photos in any kind of funny way, and I don't know how many kids have printers in their house. I've moved to using laser printers for doing taxes every year, and that is it. And frankly, I could probably go down to Staples and print out the forms I need instead of having a laser printer. But yeah, color printer, not really necessary these days. Inkjet's too expensive and all of that. I'm actually probably more likely to buy a resin printer than I would a inkjet printer, or maybe a Cricut, and just print things out on really expensive vinyl. PlayStation boss says single player games won't come to PC going forward. We talked about that. PlayStation Plus is going up. Alright, that's going to bring us to the Gematsu articles then. Although we may actually jump back and look at some more video games chronicle articles from Monday, because it looks like maybe those had opened up in the wrong place. 1047 Games announces multiplayer movement shooter Impulse for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. Toho Yukuri Mountain launches May 28th. And I guess this is the one where you're stacking the Toho characters' heads. Yeah. Not one that I'm actually interested in. Here's Impulse. Put that on the follow list. Hashiri Iberiki EX launches September 3rd. Amanda the Adventurer 3 is coming to modern consoles, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch on May 28th. It is rated very positively on Steam, but frankly, I think I kind of can get the gist as far as what this is that this is some kind of horror game, and I don't think it's really one I would want to actually play. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to just make an executive decision there and take it off of the follow list. Let's see. Gure adds PS5 and Switch versions. It's already on my follow list. Spellcaster Chronicles is going to end service on June 19th. I don't recognize the game. Poppy Playtime Chapter 5 is coming to the PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series, and Switch on May 27th. This is a DLC on Steam. It's rated mostly positive, 79%. And after fairy tale adventure game Fables of the Whale has been announced for PC. I don't know what after fairy tale means in that sense. Studio Reset has been established. Well, now immediately that's not a terrible name. It's a pretty bad name because it evokes Reset Era, which has its own detractors, and frankly, just resetting and restarting is not something people are really happy about. It's not moving forward. It's trying it a second time after already failing. It's a Canadian game studio of former BioWare, Inflection Games, and Timber Games staff, which usually means there's one or two people from each of those companies, and then they're just using that as a sales pitch. And with only one or two people from each of those companies, you're just making a new team that has no real guarantee to be anything like the old teams that those people worked on, and that has no guarantee whatsoever that the games they're going to make in the future are going to be anything like the games that they would have made in the past. Particularly when you're starting a new company, you may have different software and different licenses to software. So what you can make may be very, very different. An old school RPG, Crystals of Urm, to be published by Deck 13 Spotlight. Here. Doesn't look like much, but in fairness, I don't think any old school RPG of any sort would actually catch my attention. Moonlighter 2, The Endless Vault Early Access Blob Life Balance update is now available. You can see that in Early Access, Moonlighter 2 is 84% positive. Let's see. Clive Barker's Hellraiser Revival Genesis Configuration Trailer, a tool for both combat and puzzles. So I can't look at any of these because they're age restricted and they'd probably get my channel taken down. Inherently this is a problem. While I am very interested to see how this game actually ends up as a final product, that there is very much no chance that I would be able to play the game and put footage out about it. I would have to pretty much play the game and then just talk about the game, which would be very different for me. And even if I did talk about the game, what I could say would be very limited without getting in trouble with YouTube. So basically I just need to play the game for my own entertainment, which would be very weird for a content creator who's been doing this for over 10 years. Clive Barker's Hellraiser hopefully is also a rebuild and reboot of a otherwise like run into the ground and ruined series, which in fairness, as a movie series, Clive Barker was involved in maybe the first 3, and then all the rest were done by other people and were pretty rough. Like, if you were going to try and skim all the good aspects of Hellraiser, you're mostly going to get Hellraiser 1, 2, and maybe it's some of 3, and then that is that. So we're hoping the game goes more towards the comics or the original material, the original books, and ignores movie stuff, which it almost certainly will. But yeah, one of the things about like mature content and not safe for work going away means my warning box I've developed here will no longer trigger on those key tags, which is fine. It will still trigger on sexual content and nudity, but yeah, there will be now basically 2 tags it will trigger on instead of 4. The state of play set for June 2nd, featuring more than 60 minutes of announcements. It is funny how you can have 60 minutes of announcements and say very little, or you can have 60 minutes of announcements and you can have 122-minute trailers of new games. Or 30-second trailers, I guess, if I did the math right. Don't hold my bad math against me. I'm sick. Console archives. Tojin Makyu Den Hercules no Iko launches May 21st. This again looks like a game that never came to the West. Let's see. The former House Marquee director Harvey Kruger establishes a game studio, Cosmic Division. I would suspect that some of these new establishments are just the effect of people being laid off, and that it probably shows that it takes 5 to 6 months to form a new company, even if you have a lot of money and know how to do it and have lawyers set up. And it probably is roughly maybe 5 to 6 months in which you're getting compensated if you get laid off anyways, or there's some non-compete thing might still be in effect. Although if you get laid off, a non-compete should not really be in effect. Like, you can't tell somebody, hey, we don't want to employ you anymore, and by the way, you can't work in the same industry. Frankly, non-compete should be illegal anyways, for many moral reasons. But yeah, I imagine we will just have more companies forming new companies due to other companies canceling projects and laying off things. It is very cyclical though, and it really does, I think, just continue a system that's not particularly that great. It is very much like the Hollywood system, in that you're just creating production companies to make movies, and then when the movies fail, you're bankrupting those companies and moving on to a new production company. Arcade Archives Tag Team Wrestling launches May 21st. That one may have actually come to the West. Clockfall launches in early access for PC on May 28th. Warhorse Studios is developing an open-world Middle-earth RPG and a new Kingdom Come adventure, 2 different games. Embracer Group split into 2 companies, Fellowship Entertainment and Embracer. In a lot of ways, this also, I think, probably highlights how THQ Nordic, or now just THQ, is no longer the main focus and no longer in charge. Because, yeah, there's nothing really on the announcement here about THQ or what they're doing or their final Darksiders game, which I'd assume they're still in development of that. And then once they're done with the final Darksiders game, I wouldn't be surprised if THQ barely has any other games. They might have some SpongeBob SquarePants and Nickelodeon type remakes, or even attempts at continuations on those types of games, but it'll mean certainly that they're a much smaller company than what they were aiming to be, and that budgets need to be shifted for bigger companies that can actually finish products and release them in a reasonable time and make a good product. Which I wouldn't say that Darksiders 3 game was particularly great. A roguelite strategy deck builder auto battler called Sengokushi Bond launches this summer. Let's see. I doubt this will have a lot of popularity in the West. It's just a little too Chinese. Let's see. BXI announces digital pinball Last Gladiators for Switch 1 and 2 and PC. This is, let's see, looks like some pretty old pinball tables. Gladiators, Knights of the Roses, Dragon Showdown, and Warlock. Are any of these tables that I recognize, though? I don't think they are. I think they may be totally new. Yeah. When there is a Dark Knight pinball table, it does not look anything like this, though. Dark Knight and Dark Knight 2 both have very prominent upper play fields with a third flipper. There is a Kingdom pinball table that doesn't look like any of these. There probably is a Warlock pinball table, but I can't think of one. Weirdly, I would be surprised if there isn't actually a Samurai pinball table, just because American pinball tables, very much an American thing, and made by, frankly, old enough people who would have remembered World War II and not really been obsessed with samurai and things like that. Yeah, pinball tables in general. And there probably is a Gladiator pinball table out there, but I can't think of one. Looking at all these table designs, these do seem like they are pretty basic designs that would have been made exclusively for that game. Neptunia Unlimited has its opening movie on Komatsu if you want to check that out. Yeah, here's this. Yeah. The 1995, the legendary 4-home console digital pinball classic Last Gladiators has finally come to PC 30 years later. Interesting. So this was like a 1995 game, which that would explain a lot as far as the visuals. So they're basically probably running an emulator and just porting, not even really porting the game. But yeah, I don't think you're really going to have a lot of people nostalgic for these pinball tables. I don't think too many people played them. It is an interesting point, certainly, to show that when people were playing games on their computers in 1995, a lot of them probably were thinking about pinball machines and simplistic arcade machines, and they weren't thinking about super complicated experiences in any way. It was a lot of solitaire, a lot of free cell, a lot of minesweeper. Maybe a few people playing Myst, and that would have been about the most complicated game in 1995 or thereabout. Let's see. Pixel announces a 10th anniversary game, The Adventure of Noise or Noise. Has an interesting art style to it. Yeah. It's always interesting to see a kind of different art style. And it feels almost actually hand-drawn, which is interesting too. Let's see, Wizards of the Coast cancels Giant Skulls Dungeons and Dragons action game. Dark Scrolls has been delayed to June 22nd. I guess not to be confused with Dark Souls. This is a developer digital game, which I don't even recognize. But apparently I have seen it. It's a side-scrolling game. World of Tanks Heat launches May 26th. Do we really need yet another World of Tanks game? This is an MMO. Frontier Legends launches in early access on May 29th, which I assume is a cowboy game. Outward 2 launches in early access on July 7th. Yeah. Game Pass adding these games. Yeah, I feel pretty terrible today. Yeah, if anything, I feel like I'm getting worse. And that does make an interesting question about if you're sick the day before, should you even hope to have a plan? And frankly, when I woke up this morning, well, at like 3 in the afternoon, I felt alright, but it has just been downhill since then. Kusin City of Wolves launches July 30th. Yeah. Looks like it might be something. Furu teases an Anomaly game announcement for May 21st. A cozy rhythm action or adventure game, North Island, has been announced for PS5, Xbox Series, and Switch and PC. Yeah, I like the way this looks, but a rhythm adventure game would be tough for me to play. Hotel Barcelona DLC Late Checkout launches May 21st for PS5 and Xbox Series. Switch 2 and Switch versions have also been announced. Was Hotel Barcelona ever overall liked? Yeah, it really isn't. 92% in the last 30 days, but only 13 user reviews, so most people just haven't bothered to even play it. Overall, 69% with a very small number of user reviews on Steam. Now, maybe there's a much bigger audience playing this on, I don't know, PlayStation or Nintendo Switch, but I kind of doubt it. I imagine this DLC was already in development and they're just shoving it out. It's also crazy to have online co-op and PvP from the makers of No More Heroes and Deadly Premonition. Already was going to be a weird combination and a niche audience, and niche audience not even overwhelmingly loving it has made this game become fairly irrelevant. I suppose there's always a possibility that it could be a hidden gem decades down the line where people rediscover it and find it in its final version. But I doubt even that happens. Yeah, this is probably a great example of where if you are going to try and sell a game based on two legendary creators working together, they probably need to be extremely extremely good at what they do, where the creator of Deadly Premonition is not really great at making video games, and the creator of No More Heroes makes decent gameplay mechanics. Maybe the story is a little weak, but they're also both pretty well known for their own style of weirdness. They're also creators who are very much artistic type of creators, so they should stay in their own lane, and it would have been much better for the creator of Deadly Premonition to make a new game separate from the creator of No More Heroes making a new game. Two weird games from two weird creators is better than one weird game that is a mix of two people's weirdness. Let's see. Q Games announces cozy co-op open world golf game called Yodely Golf for PC. Let's see. It's interesting to get this announcement now because I don't think there's been an Akiba's Trip series game released in months, if not years. But the Akiba's Trip, or Akiba Strip, as it's supposed to be misread, series has topped over 1 million sales, which doesn't really sound like a lot for something that's been out since 2011, 15 years. But it is also a very niche game series that struggled, I think, at times to even come to the West. And it is a JRPG series where the characters are emotional vampires, clothing fashion vampires. So you are defeating people by stripping them of their clothing articles, and they may be defeating you by stripping you of your clothing articles. But yeah, the original Akiba Strip for PSP came out in 2011, then Undread and Undressed, and then PlayStation 3 and PS Vita, followed by ports to the PS4, PC, and that's probably about the time that I would have heard about it. Would have been Undead and Undressed as the sequel, coming to PC. Then a remastered version of the original game has never really, I think, been particularly well discounted, being such a niche series. And they're really just doing this because of the 15th anniversary. They're announcing 1 million sales. Came out in 2021, so yeah, the move now would be to play Akiba's Trip, Hellbound and Debriefed HD. is why they named it that way, as a remaster for the original game. Then play Undead and Undressed, which UU doesn't really mean anything to me, but I think it may mean something in emojis to Japanese people. But I don't think there's a great chance that Undead and Undressed is going to get a remaster. I suppose it is probably also worth pointing out that I don't believe this game has actual nudity in it at all, so it is lewd, not nude, would be my guess. I can't guarantee that to be the case, so it is very much for the horny teenager type audience who are into 2D anime girls. But yeah, I don't think it goes to a level of extremeness, and it has that Japanese JRPG elements, I think, that make it kind of a problem too, where it's just rather grindy. But yeah, it says some nudity and sexual content for Undead and Undressed, so there is actually some nudity in it. I guarantee it's not anywhere as much as it could be, for as much as the entire game fighting mechanic is stripping people of their clothing. There's a DLC here too. Moving on, Truckful adds PS4 and PS5 versions, playable at Bit Summit Punch. Here is the original game. Now noticeably, this one isn't even tagged as having sexual content in it, it's tagged as having nudity, and yet that didn't trigger my warning message because nudity is so far down on the tags. The tags are only really looking at the first 4 or so. But yeah, you just kind of beat up people, these vampire characters, and your finishing move pulls clothing off of them. It's a very silly premise, to say the least. It's like a finishing move. And yeah, it just leaves people in their underwear. But it is immature. Yeah, I think part of the thing is that because they're vampires, the more clothing you remove from them, the more they're hurt by the sunlight. This is certainly back in the day when Akihabara, or Akihabara, was a much better place to go and buy anime stuff in Japan, whereas now it's become too expensive and too touristy, and you can get better deals in other places. While you may still want to go to Akiba to just look around, you probably don't want to go there to actually spend any money. And certainly this would have been in an era when the otaku culture was way more of a big thing and way more focused on and celebrated, whereas the otaku culture now may have just evolved to being pretty normalized, and so you don't really need a special kind of mecca to go and celebrate your hobby when you can just get anime in any convenience store anywhere in Japan. Well, manga, at least. I imagine you can get it at any convenience store, any kombini in Japan. I imagine, I'm not sure. Moving on, The Adventures of Elliot, the Millennial Tales prologue demo is now available. Yeah, you can tell the coughing goes away for a while and then it comes back. Nintendo announces Picto Nico for iOS and Android. Turn your photos into mini games. It's the Sony Interactive Entertainment no longer releasing single-player games on PC. Yeah, the coughing I think is very much just because my immune system is overreacting. It thinks there's something there. And you'll be surprised how many disorders are just kind of built around that idea. And a lot of allergies are suspected to be your immune system overreacting. So, like an allergy to peanuts, for instance, the general thought is if somehow peanut butter gets on your skin before you digest it and eat it, your body will think it's bad and overreact with a histamine response and an allergy, whereas there is now very much a recommended slow, safe procedure to introduce things that humans are known to be allergic to kids in food form, so that the body can realize, hey, that's just food and you don't have to overreact to it. Which does make an interesting but unethical experiment, certainly, in that what if you fed things that aren't considered food to a baby? Would they no longer have an allergy to it? If you fed, say, the poison for poison ivy to a baby, would the body be okay with that and not overreact to it? Probably not. Almost certainly would kill the baby. Very unethical to even try it. If you fed mercury to a baby and things like that. There's no telling how much the body might be able to handle. Of course, why risk it? And why do that kind of experiment unless absolutely necessary? GameDeveloper.com articles after horrific unethical experimentation talk. Let's see, Ubisoft's net bookings are down 54% year on year. Publisher is undergoing one of the most ambitious transformations in the company's history. Ubisoft CEO says amid layoffs and studio closures. It's pretty obvious that they are trying to shutter and run Ubisoft into the ground, and this is by this time in 5 years, Ubisoft may still be around, but it's not going to be anything like the Ubisoft that exists now. I'm frankly surprised that they're still announcing like Assassin's Creed games and things like that instead of just saying, hey, we're straight out of business. But yeah, we'll see if those games actually get released and how well they're received. Xbox added Matthew Ball and Scott Van Vliet to the leadership team. Hasbro canceled the Dungeons & Dragons game led by Respawn veterans. It's funny how that story is rephrased multiple times from different sources, whether it's talking about Giant Skull or whether it's talking about veterans from other companies who formed Giant Skull. The Embracer chairman says cost control doesn't get enough respect after presiding over years of layoffs. The reality here is we worked hard to retain as many people as possible through a very difficult period. Honestly, I would say unless you are receiving no compensation yourself, you don't deserve any respect there. Like, if you are cutting your own salary to prevent layoffs, if you've managed to prevent layoffs, that's great. But and then I would respect you. But this is really a typical rich person's mentality that they deserve to be applauded and respected in that they ran the company into the ground as the leader and then laid off people and now are not getting applause for laying off people. On the other hand, there probably are a few CEOs out there that are doing really good cost control, not laying off anybody, but also not letting the budgets balloon as much as the game industry tends to balloon, or the movie industry tends to balloon. And yeah, if we could see more of that kind of cost control, where game projects cost millions of dollars instead of billions of dollars to develop, that would be really good. And yeah, this is the kind of statement that should be ignored, and you know, just shows how disconnected from reality rich people are. Which, yeah, anybody that's got a pocket square is probably a little too rich. UK publishing Ed Corp breaks cover after signing Garbage Country. The fledgling company will fund, market, and develop the original and licensed titles for PC and console. Okay. Then, former BioWare, Inflection Games, and Timber Games developers launch Studio Reset. Former Housemarque game director launches a new studio called Cosmic Division. Embracer is going to spin off major video game franchises and studios. That looks a lot more like Lara Croft in the face. Yep. If anything, I think there's probably a very good argument to start being made around Lara Croft, and that the face needs to be more consistent, and perhaps the thighs need to be more consistent too. There's been way too many jokes and talks about the boobs that people have let very many different versions of Lara Croft show up. Her arms are pretty scrawny too for somebody that hangs. I would say her head does feel a little bit big in this design too, anatomically speaking. Let's see. Sony is being sued for an alleged tariff double recovery windfall. The lawsuit argues Sony will receive a double recovery windfall, which should be passed on to the consumers. Instead, I think a lot of these lawsuits are going to get put into play. We'll see how far they go and how much precedent gets set, and how this all works in the long run, as far as, will anybody get any money back for tariffs that are now deemed illegal, that were collected on behalf and then for prices being raised. I wouldn't be surprised if this lawsuit falls apart and judges just say, well, you chose to pay that price, and they were honest about what the price was. Even if they did label it as a tariff in the billing, it doesn't matter, because we're going to let them lie about that and keep the money. Which I definitely have heard people argue that the tariffs that the Trump administration often put in were pretty much designed to not last or be deemed legal. That way corporations could charge consumers more and then keep the difference later. I don't know if I believe that, but I definitely have heard people make that argument that this was the plan all along. Let's see, Fortnite returns to the App Store everywhere except Australia, but the legal dispute is still going. CL Games and Epic Games terminate the Lords of the Fallen publishing deal. The agreement would have seen the upcoming sequel made available on PC exclusively through the Epic Games Store. That might be the beginning of people no longer doing Epic Game exclusives. But it also might just be a case where Epic is running out of money I get the same feeling with like Prime Video. It feels like they are just wrapping up all of the projects they had in the past for Amazon Prime Video, and they may not have any real exclusives going forward, or they may have a whole new set of exclusives that are greenlit by somebody new in charge. Sony increases the price of PlayStation Plus games for new customers. Yeah. Now I'm not going to go through any of these games, so I think what happened here is the Gaming on Linux tab and the Gaming on Linux articles got moved around for some reason. I don't know why. So let's go through Gaming on Linux, and then that's just going to be the end of the stream. I will look at all the games on my own. Apologies for not showing them, but I'm really not in shape to do that. Yeah. But yeah. Let's see, Darksiders War Mastered Edition gets Vulkan rendering and improved Steam input support and more. Which I guess that's something that THQ Nordic has done. Darksiders 1 was really the best Darksiders, and if you're only going to play one, it is the one to play, and War Mastered Edition probably is the better way to play it. But then maybe just don't play any of the others. It's a shame. It's also still a very big shame how this game from 2016 is probably the closest game that we have to a 3D Ocarina of Time style adventure game that I can point to for PC gaming. There's, just not a lot of Zelda-like adventures that have dungeons that play that way. There's a lot more Metroidvanias for sure on PC. But yeah. Maybe Zeldas themselves are so rare because they take so much work. But yeah, I would like to have something that is more like a Zelda-like adventure with a decent story. Yeah, Darksiders 4 will be the final game. Darksiders Genesis is a side game I haven't played. Darksiders 3 I did play. Let's see. Darksiders 2, pretty different from Darksiders 1. Yeah. The style of games is being compared to is the mixed reviewed Diablo 4, Wuthering Waves, Elden Ring, which, yes, if you're willing to embrace the idea of a Dark Souls, Demon Souls type game, Elden Ring might have that kind of fantasy feel of a Zelda game, but it doesn't really play like anything like a Zelda game. You don't get items that help you unlock other dungeons. You don't get better generally at the game other than just getting good at actually controlling the game. Maybe God of War games are somewhat like Zelda games. I'm not sure. I don't really think so. But yeah, there's nothing really being suggested here that is actually that close. Witcher 3 is not really close. Skyrim's not close. It does perhaps highlight why they needed new tags so that maybe their algorithm would be better at suggesting games, but I don't think the algorithm would get any better suggesting games because it's still just going to suggest the most popular game that has the most number of tags, not actually get into a deeper division of it. Frankly, I hate to suggest AI, but it might be better if their algorithm had an AI that would just scan the description of all games and try and link and compare and make a mesh network of the descriptions of all games, so that when one game is suggested, it would be much closer to its description and less based, and not just exclusively based on tags. And certainly you could have AI also, and I don't know how much of this really would even be AI. You could probably do it without actually using any kind of large language module, a model. You could have it scan the reviews too, and if another game is being mentioned in a review, maybe there's a connection there that you should make. Let's see. Moving on. Paralives is ready to take on The Sims with new footage ahead of release, which is a game I don't recognize, and it is interesting to point out that there has been a couple other games that felt like they would have been new Sim competitors, and they really haven't gone anywhere so far. It's certainly very difficult to try and make a game like The Sims, and it's very questionable whether The Sims as a game is even good. Yeah, I definitely don't feel like I am probably the audience for games like The Sims. You've got a bidet just shooting water out onto the floor. It fires. Yeah, this definitely feels like it's inspired by The Sims. I guess Paralives is probably Parasocial Lives. It has a weird art style and perhaps an inconsistent design of characters. I just don't know how much of this you really can even you can actually interact with people, or whether you're just watching people interact with themselves. Obviously you can build the houses. And see, that's kind of the weirdness of Sims games anyways, is that while you had some level of interactivity and control, it didn't really seem like Sims games ever focused on what control mechanics you're supposed to be focusing on and what things you can actually do. Yeah, this is crazy to even suggest, but if I was gonna make a Sims game for myself, I would have a self-insert player character that is, through talking and moving objects, subtly manipulating the world around me to try and get different outcomes. And that certainly would all of a sudden become more of a Machiavellian puzzle game than a Sims game. But yeah, if I'm like putting changing people's alarm clocks so they wake up earlier and things like that, that would be not really the kind of cozy laid back experience you would expect. Let's see, Square Enix is rolling out Steam Cloud support to various classics. Square Enix is going back on some of their older titles to see what small improvements they can make, like hooking up Steam Cloud support. This probably means that they also are saving themselves on some server rentals for games that probably are putting less than a few megabytes of save data in the cloud. It also is an indicator that Steam Cloud is really easy to implement. They can just have probably an intern look at their code and tweak it into the game. Yeah, I don't know if it is as easy as just saving to a different folder that then the Steam client synchronizes over to a server on the internet, or if you have to actually do something a little bit more than that. Probably have to do a little bit more than that, but probably not too much. I would be surprised if it was more than 4 or 5 lines of code. And there's nothing that I could think of that would be special around save files that would prevent you from putting it in the cloud, other than it just taking too long to download and upload Steam Cloud files. You're looking at Sleeping Dogs Definitive Edition. I don't know why I even have that game. I must have gotten that in a bundle. Here's Paralives. Yeah. I definitely do have this like desire that it'd be great to find somebody that would be all in on something like this game, and then I could just say, hey, why don't you play this game and give me a review for it. I don't know if that's somebody I need to actually personally know, or if I just need to find a YouTuber who would look at a game like that. But I guess if my channel was ever anywhere close to being successful, that would be a case where the yeah, that would be a case for the future where I can find somebody to have them provide coverage and create more things for my channel while playing a game that I probably am not that interested in it. I'm seeing on the chat Mamudata425 saying, hi Rydo, do you remember me? How are you? I think I remember you. Man, it feels like that was maybe 2 or 3 years ago that there was a person with a similar name that would chat quite often. As far as how I am very sick right now, and that is why I'm rushing to end the stream, so I will have to excuse myself and say maybe I'll be healthier on Friday's stream if you want to come back then. But I really am not in any shape to do anything extra, including converse with the chat. Apologies. I'm really sick at the moment, and overall have not been particularly healthy in the past few years. Lots of stuff has happened, most of which people would classify as negative. Let's see, the huge Test of Time update for Civilization 7 is out now. Okay. Civilization 7 is mixed reviewed. The hope, I think, is that the new update would convince people to come back and play it. I don't know if you're ever going to beat 41,000 mixed reviews, though. Embracer Group is split again, spinning off their biggest IP along with plans for IP partnerships. Let's see. Yet another zombie survivors crossed over 500,000 sold, with plans for a 1.0 release revealed. Yeah. This is really well received as a game, so I guess I'll put it on the wish list here. Yeah. On the chat, Mom Mood Ata, assume that is probably how you pronounce it, says he was studying medicine in Russia and followed your channel when the channel started more than 4 years ago. Well, my channel started more than 10 years ago, and he says more than 7 years have passed. Yep, time flies by when, whether you want it to or not. But yeah, that is the person who I thought he was. Let's see, the factory cooking automation game Snacktorio arrives in June. We'll leave it at that. Snacktorio. Direct's D7 VK version 1.10 brings even more 2D upgrades for retro Direct 3D games on Linux. This looks like a long list of things it does. Proton 11 beta has been released with more regression fixes. A long list of things that they are working on. Several new games that are getting updates and are newly playable, Deadly Premonition being one of them. Yep. NVIDIA reveals more GPU driver security flaws for May 26. Yep, lots of security flaws being found. Pool game roguelike stick/ball is totally unfiltered score chasing chaos. Yeah, that's on the fall list. 85 user reviews, 89% positive. Do I want to put it on my wish list? Not sure. Again, I'm not really in the mental state to try and agonize over decisions. Planetary Annihilation Titans gets Steam player-to-player multiplayer and more content to come. See that this is mostly positive too. I'll think about that later. Arc Raiders gets de novo anti-cheat, a new trader, a new weapon, and more. Arc Raiders mixed in the last 30 days, perhaps because of adding de novo. And Forza Horizon 6 is out. Valve update Proton hotfix for Linux, and initial thoughts from Gaming on Linux are available in this article if you want to check it out. We got about 4 more stories, and then I'm gonna wrap up. And even when I run a rush through these streams, they still take forever. Just so much I want to actually know and cover. Let's see, Heroes of Might and Magic 2 Project F Heroes 2 version 1.1.16 is out now. Yep, I do wonder if I was ever to actually try and cover these games, which I probably would never do. They take way too long to play. If there's really benefit to using the open source versions of it versus just trying to run it in its original form. It might be very much impossible to run it in its original form, though. The Steam beta brings even more Steam controller tweaks and a firmware fix for Linux. Okay. And here's the story we were talking about before, and it's interesting to point out that this is the only one of my 4 news sources that cover this. And I got this information just by being connected to Steam's direct RSS feed to their direct blog as far as the Steam client updates go. So, Video Games Chronicle, Gamatsu, and GameDeveloper.com all either got this news and didn't think it was worth putting out an article, which I think is crazy, or they are all so bad at registering an RSS feed for news from Valve that they didn't get the article. Which, I mean, that is just a smack in the face for video game journalism, certainly, is that, yeah, you pretty well want to be following Valve and Microsoft and PlayStation, Sony, and Xbox on every kind of form that they might be putting out announcements. Which, in fairness, it might have been the case that Valve didn't tweet out this on their Twitter or Blue Sky or whatever, and only had it on their RSS feed and their blog, but you still should have caught it. So yeah, Valve is making adjustments to Steam tags, and they've settled the Vampire Survivor like article argument with Bullet Heaven. They are certainly trying to get away from using tags that reference other games. So they are adding Bullet Heaven, they are adding Desktop Companion, and they call that games that use only part of your screen and keep you company while you do other things. I don't think that qualifies as a game. I feel like the games there should be in quotes. Yeah. Okay, well, Mamu Dada puts out an interesting point. He goes, my friend, I don't mean to upset you, but don't you think there's something that needs to change in the channel or the presentation style to attract more interaction, subscriber, and viewers? Well, I will say there is something that's changed fairly recently in the past year or two. I have realized I don't want suggestions from people. I'm happy with the way I do my things. If somebody is a proven success, I might approach them and ask them personally for suggestions, but I am not particularly happy with the suggestions I've gotten over the past 10 years from random people who generally are either going to tell me things that I've already heard and I just personally don't want to do, because my channel is very much what I want to do and not just trying to chase views and subscribers. So yeah, that's the thing that has changed. Now, would I like my channel to have a lot more watch time and a lot more viewers? Yes. But do I want to fully compromise myself to get that? No. So, again, remember I'm sick right now, so I might be being a little bit ruder than I normally would. But no, I'm just not I'm not open to suggestions at this point. I am happy enough to do what I want to do and have my channel stay at the level it is, versus just compromising myself over and over again. Plus, over 10 years, I have tried so many other changes, and it didn't really work on any of them. The truth is, you get lucky on YouTube in the first couple of years, and you're the 1 in a billion success. Otherwise, the algorithm just buries you. So, no. I'm pretty proud and pretty happy with what I've done with my channel, and at the moment I am pretty much happy with continuing to do what I've done. I've made lots of changes that have gone either unnoticed and unappreciated, such as the vertical streaming that I'm doing right now, or the YouTube shorts that I was doing for a long time there. But yeah, no, the thing is, in particular, everybody that's made suggestions has not helped, and it's only irritated me. So no offense to people who want to give suggestions and all of that, but if you really want to help me get other people to subscribe and just out of sheer pity actually watch my channel and give it a ton of watch time, that's the way to help. Telling me to do something different is not going to help. And that's probably for my entire life, more than just my YouTube life too. People get old. They don't want to change. Yeah. But yeah, I'm enjoying what I'm doing pretty well. And I definitely wouldn't enjoy just trying to sell out. So, yeah. I was going to have that conversation at some point in the future, but it never really came up. But yeah. let's get back to the news story so I can wrap up for today. So, yeah, I don't think desktop companion games are really games. And I think it is crazy that they are giving it a tag, but I also suspect some of these tags may literally be to just segregate certain things, and in the future you may see desktop companions getting targeted for complete removal from Steam, as they are just saying, hey, these aren't really games and we only sell games. They're adding an organizing game. We've seen quite a lot of those games, and interesting, they are separating cleaning from organizing, which there definitely will be some overlap in which games will have the organizing and cleaning tags, but not 100% guaranteed overlap. And I think that's what they're going for too. Same is true for decorating. They're adding wushu, which I don't know how anybody reading that is supposed to know that's pronounced wushu. I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it. In which they call that historical fantasy adventure featuring martial arts, competing sex, and inner ki, which is interesting. I'm not sure if that's really what you would call wushu or not. And then they're adding Jinji. Again, I'm not sure how you're supposed to pronounce that, which is fantasy adventure focused on cultivating supernatural powers and strength, which kind of feels a little bit more like a Dragon Ball Z type thing. And I've never heard of this phrase Jinji before. It does certainly show that there's more Asian influence happening now as far as the tags go. Falling blocks, Tetris-like games, obviously. Although there are a decent amount of games now that are pretty far from Tetris games that do include Tetris games. Espionage is obviously spying and secretly securing valuable intel. Samurai, we pretty much know what Samurai is. It's kind of weird that there hasn't been a tag for Samurai. Zoo games, weird, there hasn't been one for that. But then they're also throwing in wolves. Now there is a decent amount of games with wolves in them, but I would say maybe a third of them are visual novel adult games where it is wolves making out with each other. So that seems weird. Capybara seems weird. Definitely feels like they're kind of filling out a list here just so it's a longer list. I'm not sure you really needed a tag for capybaras in particular, but the more tags, I guess, the better, maybe. Now, interesting definition here for cults: small groups with extreme devotion to a person, thing, or belief. I don't feel like cults, in my definition, are cults unless it's extreme devotion to a person, and that person has to be genuinely accepted to be alive and around. Inherently, Jesus with the 12 disciples is a cult. Him being resurrected and sent to heaven, or him being executed, either way, ended up with him not being around, at which point Christianity becomes less of a cult and more of an established longer term religion, in my mind. Although that is perhaps too narrow of a definition, because I still would argue that maybe Mormonism and focus on Joseph Smith, or Scientology and focus on their founder, are extreme devotions to a person, and those people aren't around either. So yeah, maybe I'm being too narrow in my definition. Poker games, weird that there haven't been more poker games. Weird that Valve is willing to dip a toe further into gambling games, even if most of the gambling games, well, all the gambling games on Steam are not allowed to actually gamble by legal definitions, although there are plenty of poker games where you are able to make microtransactions to buy virtual coins that then you gamble with. And then language learning games, which I think that probably is a very good tag to add. Meanwhile, they add this long, kind of fluffed out bunch of tags to then remove more tags than they've added. They're getting rid of 3D vision, okay, ambient, America, blood, crowdfunded, cult classic, documentary. Documentary almost always would have been a video tag, not actually a game tag, I would bet. Drama, probably a video tag too. And then they want to get rid of anything that's copyrightable or singular to a single franchise. Dungeons and Dragons, electronic is generic, experience is generic, feature film, again a movie, foreign. But then they have like a double reason here that they want to get rid of the tag Game Maker and Games Workshop because they don't want them mentioned along with RPG Maker, because that is all the garbage RPG Maker asset flip games tend to get tagged with these by users, I think, more than the actual developers, which there still is a fairly big problem with that in that if you are a user trying to add a tag to a game, it seems way too easy to add a wrong tag and way too hard to remove a wrong tag and way too easy for people to not add tags when they should have tags. But yeah, foreign, you can see why they would want to get rid of that. That means nothing to a global company. What's foreign to one consumer would not be foreign to another. Illuminati, Kickstarter, they don't want to mention another thing, but also it kind of just doesn't matter if something is crowdfunded or kickstarted. They want everything to be considered a finalized product when it comes to Steam, not some kind of early access, never going to be finished project, even though there's plenty of early access, never going to be finished projects. Lego is getting removed, Masterpiece. The big one here, I still think is mature and not safe for work. Those are the two big ones. Movie, narration, Roguevania as a concept. Yeah, I don't think you really need compounds like that. You could do roguelite, roguelike, and Metroidvania and just have two tags. Warhammer 40k, web publishing, obviously not a game, and well written is too generic a description. They explain in this, I don't know if Gaming on Linux wrote it up. They explain in the blog specifically that mature and not safe for work just overlapped too much. Like gory, violent, horrific, all potentially could have meant mature or not safe for work, as well as sexual content. And so they want each of those games to use the tags gory if they're gory, or sexual content if they have sexual content. My fear is eventually anything tagged with sexual content might get taken down from Steam and just censored completely. Yeah. But the explanation is not actually in this article. And then Clicker has been renamed to Incremental. Conversation has been renamed to Dialogue Heavy for clarity. They made a few tags plural, so dogs, foxes, vampires, elves, dwarves, and assassins, which is interesting because that means if you make a game with a single dog, you might be tempted not to add dogs as a tag, but you probably would still be heavily encouraged to just use the plural. Pool was humorously applied to games with a swimming pool. So we've renamed this to billiards, which is the overarching term for all games played with cue sticks anyways. They've merged jet into flight, as jet wasn't unique enough. And then they've merged unforgiving into difficult. So some of these tags are just going to be merged, whereas some of these are going to just be new, and some of these are going to be completely removed as what you can use for new games. Nothing is changing at the moment for old games. Then our last Gaming on Linux article says Sony is no longer bringing PlayStation narrative single-player games to PC, which that still is very much the big news that isn't such big news. Alright, and see, normally here I would go through roughly 100 games that just came out on Steam, but I'm going to do that all off screen. Then I would do the follow-less cleanup, which I'm not going to do any of that at all. Then I would be at the end of the show. But I'm just going to end the show here. Mamu Dada ended the conversation several minutes ago going, I wish you success and enjoy what you do. Thank you. And then he says thank you and I wish you all the best. Again, thank you. Sorry if I came off too abrupt. But yeah. That's my feeling. Straight up. I'm just not open for business for really making any changes. I have several changes already on the back burner because I have so much other stuff to do. And I'm definitely not healthy enough to take on more projects at this time. I may never be healthy enough again in my old age to take on more projects. That is the problem with getting old, particularly if you get a lot older than me, is that you may be alive, but you're spending your entire days, every hour, just keeping yourself alive and not able to actually affect the world around you much. Anyways, I don't want to get melancholic here, so that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask people to like, share, subscribe, comment, and most importantly, watch every single second of my videos so I can get more watch time. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.